We call it the Analytics Insider because you bring speakers who are leaders in their fields to talk about a theme that is central to the evolution of analytics in practice. How does it change lives? And how does it work in organizations? The topic for today, as you know, is privacy and personalization. And what we mean is how can we achieve both objectives? And each of these speakers have prepared their comments, their opinions, and their vision of what it could be from the perspective of their industry and their individual perspective.
So what I'm going to try to do, and actually our slides are starting to merge together, I think, and there's some common themes that are happening. And I want to talk about the ecosystem of healthcare in particular as more of a use case, and the things that we have to think about related to how these things all come together. So if you're trying to manage this population, and I'll give you an example of a shared savings contract. What this is basically the providers and the insurance companies have come together, and they're going to manage these populations, which are the attributed lives. And what will happen is someone will have Big Blue, and someone will have Anthem, and someone will have MMO. And they're within that pool of people that we call this diabetic population. And it's really, really rich data. So we might have a set of data, but now we're adding a lot of other sources of data to get a much more robust view on this patient. And again, we know that can be a little dangerous because the data pool is getting richer and we have to be able to protect it. So AI can help us intervene in certain ideas in the middle here. We can crunch the data and come up with some risk models to figure out who's the healthiest, who's the least healthy in the population, and target the interventions that way. But the one that I deal with all the time is the security rule. Now you've got electronic protected health information, and there are certain rules, administrative, technical, and physical safeguards you have to put in place to actually safeguard the information. That's your encryption standards, your authentication standards, your policies and procedures around that, how you train your workforce, and how you get them to actually do a great job with the patient's data. The last part of this, there's just the overall process and the governance around how you handle data. You need to develop a governance structure that actually has the proper authority, and maybe a committee that comes together that decides when you're actually going to use these technologies and when you shouldn't. When ethically you want to have an intervention with machine learning, and when you don't. When you don't want a machine determining who should live and who should die. Those types of issues should be covered with a governance structure. And because I'm a commercial lawyer, I couldn't help myself, but you got to vet your vendors, and you have to go through the process of actually incorporating them into your overall culture in order to actually have the best bang for the buck in a safe manner. Last but not least is my love of my life, which is contracts. Everyone has risk, but nobody has more risk than the patient. And we have to put the patients in the center of everything. And if we don't, we're going to end up with trouble. So, data empathy is the big idea here for me, and it's literally treating the data as if it's a human being standing right in front of us. And that's the ecosystem that I think works, and we're obligated, as an insurance company or a provider, a healthcare provider, you're obligated to do these things, and there are grave consequences if you don't fulfill them.
What is the clinic doing to kind of think about, you know, you guys have our data and you're trying to use it responsibly, but what tools are out there, or what initiatives are out there to put that power back in our hands, holding on to, like I have to ask 17 people for my lab results. Why don't I own them?
There's a lot of answers in that. So blockchain is still, to me, very new, right? And people are still trying to find the right problems to solve with it. I think what it's forcing the conversation around is, again, the ethics and the transparency around it, because people can be left in the dark about all the great initiatives that we're doing with Google and Microsoft and IBM, but to your point is, how do you get engaged in that? And the answer is, unless you're under the GDPR regime in the UK, you're not. The healthcare system, the banking systems with Graham Leach, they've tried to attack some of this, but the reality is the consumer What's really tricky, and I think this is the best answer, the laws are always way behind the technology. So as technology skyrockets like a hockey stick and the law just kind of peters around, because we're sitting here right now and someone is stealing my information, right? And this is just the reality of the world that we live in. So I don't know. I think it's forcing the conversation. It's getting big organizations to be more ethical around the data themselves. And not just because we're going to get punished. There's got to be a whole culture shift with how we actually have that empathy for the consumers.